Okay, good afternoon. I think we have less students today. Okay. So today we have the rest of us 3 teams to give their presentation. Okay, and the first team to present today is the Fissure. So are you guys ready?
We are ready.
Yeah, we should be ready, yeah.
Okay, so let me set up the screen share control to multiple users. Now I think you guys should be available.
Can y'all see that?
Yes. Okay, go ahead whenever you're ready.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Noah Hargrove. I'm here with Charles Eldridge, Tyler Schlebach, JT Foote, and Caden Garcia, and we're here to tell you all about Fissure. Fissure is an all-in-one tournament organizer that is designed to help our users create and facilitate League of Legends tournaments, taking all of the hassle out of their hands and putting it onto our application. Our original plan for the product was to include a tournament organizer that would allow users to create teams, tournaments, brackets, and actually organize the bracket itself and get the tournament itself organized. A draft simulator to help all the players pick and ban their champions before getting into the Rift, and player statistics pages and leaderboards, but we've been forced to drop the player statistics pages and leaderboards, but we are still really excited to show all of you our tournament organizer and draft simulator today. So to start it off, I'm going to pass it off to Charles to talk about our development lifecycle.
Hello, everyone. My name is Charles. I'm going to be going over the CS portion of the presentation. So to start things off, the kind of development process we followed was a mixture of agile and waterfall. We started off with our end goals and requirements outlined, and we worked towards that in an iterative process. So we worked on it kind of page by page, component by component, saw if it worked. If it didn't, reworked it, but just kind of kept things agile as we're working forward. For the back-end responsibilities, it was kind of a mix between Garrett and I, with myself implementing authentication throughout the application and Garrett implementing Firestore for whatever pages needed Firestore. For front end, a lot of the initial functionality was completed by Garrett, and during our process, I came in after and kind of implemented the design of the overall pages and the user interface. And finally, for infrastructure, our IT group members, JT and Tyler, worked really hard on that for getting the client and the server hosted and kind of managing our Git actions for when we're pushing to the repo. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about our technology stack a little bit. For the client side, it was just a mix of general web development, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but the framework we used was React. It came in really useful for this project for managing the state and also being able to reuse components throughout different application and pages. We host our client through Firebase. Then for the server, we use the server specifically for the draft tool, since a lot of the functionality for managing Firestore and authentication can be handled client side. But for the server, we use it for managing who joins the draft tool and what they're picking and other various states it'll be in. And that's actually hosted on the Google Compute Engine. Finally, for the database, we use just Firestore and Firebase authentication. Authentication really came into a lot of help because it managed a lot of the backend infrastructure for us, and we could spend more time actually developing our product rather than worrying about small infrastructure changes. And then finally, for managing our repo, we used GitHub and Git. We did a lot of Git pushing, Git pulling, figuring out how to merge and where to merge this semester. So we had a lot of experience with both those tools. Finally, I'm going to be talking about maintenance, what we plan for the future, kind of fixing up what there is to need to fix up and maybe implementing additional functionality. So one thing we wanted to implement that we did with authentication is a Firestore provider and relevant methods. The way our Firebase authentication works right now is we have one kind of JavaScript file that manages the state for the entire application. And it's a lot easier that way since we won't have to rewrite code, and we could just call a method, use the specific context the state is in, and get the information we would need from Firestore. And then all in all, once we implement this, it would enhance functionality and then better data management. On the kind of front end side, the UI and functionality, we wanted to increase usability just in general. There's some little interactions that are a little bit weird, and finally consolidate some pages. Right now, I think we kind of have it spread, some information spread out over multiple pages when they could be kind of consolidated into one, say, tournament manager. And then finally, just general bug fixes. But for the next step, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to our IT team.
Okay, so for the cloud, everything is hosted in the cloud because it is a web application. So we're using Firebase to actually host the client-side website and to handle the authentication and database, as Charles talked about. We're using GitHub for our code storage and to allow us to collaborate between multiple people at the same time. And we're using GitHub Actions to automate code deployment to Firebase and to the Google Cloud Engine. And for the Google Cloud Platform, we're using that for our backend WebSocket server. Next slide, please. And we had some issues. So GitHub Actions is extremely finicky because when you try and use a monorepository and it uses the default location for things start getting messy when you try and build stuff. So we had multiple rewrites to allow all of those things to work nicely together. Additionally, we were originally going to use Firebase Cloud Functions for the WebSocket server, but because Google owns the product and they try and abstract away all of the management, it's not super flexible. The documentation for what we were trying to do was a little bit sparse, and it gets very expensive to have apps running all the time. It's not designed for those kinds of WebSocket constant connections that are always running, and it was unable to pull from GitHub automatically for some reason. We were using some other options in the meantime, but I wanted to find a better solution than Heroku or a DigitalOcean self-hosted server, so I chose Google Compute Engine. If you go to the next slide, please. Because it's really cheap for what we're trying to do because there's no ingress or egress fees. It's automatically provisioned using code that I wrote to download from GitHub automatically, install all the necessary files, and then start running. It also has a static IP address, which allows us to set up our own network and get everything hosted correctly from client to server. So additionally, there were some firewall rules due to using Google Compute Engine that were a little bit more tricky to deal with. And originally it was an HTTP WebSocket server, so I had to rewrite the API to allow for HTTPS connections because all browsers hate when you try and use HTTP connections on an HTTPS website. And now I'll pass it off to Tyler.
So for our backend services, we use quite a few APIs, predominantly the multitude of Riot APIs. Starting with this would be Summoner v4, which pulls user information, Match v4, which pulls match information, so you could check and see what's going on with actual matches while they're happening. The LOL status v4, which pulls actual league status on whether or not the services are actually running, because you really don't want to start a tournament and then realize the game services are down, and that kind of defeats the whole purpose. We use Node.js version 15.13.0 as the whole setup for all the development. And for actually setting up Firebase itself, we use their CLI, which allowed for very quick and very easy setup and management. I think it was total like 5 lines of code and the whole thing was done. Next slide, please. As for our backup plan, since, as said earlier, we use GitHub for a lot of this. And because of that, not only did it act as a pipeline for programmers to send in their code back and forth, but it also acts as a very good backup source for the source code. So if we had a situation like I did earlier in the semester where my computer crashed and I had to completely reset everything, GitHub was very useful in getting everything back to where we needed, and there was very little issues beyond that. As for Firebase, we use that as a source, since it's tied in directly with Google and Google Cloud, as a backup for the user data stored. So any user accounts and everything can quickly be backed up and brought back in case of issues. And then I'll pass this on to Caden for financials.
Now, why would you use Fissure? Well, to answer that question and start it off, it's a completely unique product. There are other websites out there that do similar things or parts of the things we do, such as other tournament organizers. You can go to Discord or Reddit to find tournaments getting played, and you can find mock drafts out there to do the banning process. But you're not going to find any website that does all three of those things in one site like we do. In addition, very low cost for about $3.50 a month after you get through our first trial period. You have access to all the different types of tournaments. You have access to all the different types of all the different database of open tournaments. You have everything. Whenever you want to play, there's going to be something out there for you. Ease of access, like I said before, all three of the major key components you need to do to get right into a tournament, all on Fissure. You don't have to go to any other outside sources. A high variety of options. Unlike other tournament organizers out there that only do single or double elimination, we have single elimination, double elimination, round robin, and a free for all. So no matter what type of tournament you want to do, you have access to do it. And it fills a niche in the market. League of Legends players have been searching for something like this for a very long time, and it's something nobody else has done, and we're finally here to step up and fill that hole that many people have been looking for. Next slide, please. So going into our customer target and our segmentation. It's a League of Legends tournament creator, so it's self-explanatory that we would go after league players, but more specifically, we're going to be going after the competitive league players. Now, this is a vast majority of the league population, as it's not a very casual game in and of itself. So almost the entire population of League of Legends players are open and people where we will be looking to target. More specifically, the vast majority of league players are males that are 16 to 23 years old, and the biggest places in the world where league is popular and active are in the North American, European, and Asian servers. Now, a little bit about League of Legends and the player count. It is growing exponentially, and it does this every single year. There's an increase in player count almost every year, even as much as 100 million over the past 8. So we're never going to run out of people to go after. Next slide, please. Now, why will Fissure work? Like I said 2 slides before, this is a niche that the League of Legends community has been looking for and have been looking for a solution to fill. So we are going to be the only people that are filling this spot, and everybody will come to us to use our services. Now, I said it's essentially completely unique. There is another tournament maker out there that's from Riot, which is the developers of League of Legends, but this is not open to the casual, the lower tiered players. This is not open to the general public. It's for the professional leagues, the professional players, and the Twitch streamers, the people that get hundreds of thousands of people watching and spread publicity for the game. Next slide, please. Going into our costs. So for Google Firebase and Google Cloud, they both have a pay per use model. Firebase's is 18 gigabytes, that 18 cents per gigabytes you use, and it's anywhere between 2 cents to 16 cents per 100,000 threads written, stored, and deleted. And the Google Cloud is pennies on the dollar to keep it up and running. So we're putting $100 down to cover all of these costs, really just making sure that even if we absolutely explode overnight, we're going to make sure to have enough money to cover the expenses it will ask for. The rest of our costs will come out of our will be marketing expenses, which we're putting about $520 down per year to reach out to middle end to smaller Twitch streamers that have a following, but not the ones that have hundreds of thousands of followers, as well as targeting free places such as social media, Discord servers, and partnering with Reddit servers. Next, please. Now, what we all care about, the money. How are we getting it? So we have a payment system. It's a trial system that leads into a premium account system. So for the trial, you have 3 tournaments before you must upgrade to a premium account. In your trial account, you only have access to the single elimination tournaments. However, we're only going to make the tournament organizers pay for this premium account. The regular players do not need to have one, just the tournament organizers. And we'll be charging $3.50 per month for this for the account being given the status of premium. And as you can see on our accounts receivable, we have $420 coming in, $3.50. We settled on 10 accounts off the bat, times 12 is 420. Now, how did we get these 10 accounts? We made a focus group on Reddit that had about 35 members join and give their opinion on how much this was worth and if they actually cared enough to make an account with us. We had about 35 members, take off the troll accounts. It's Reddit, of course, there's gonna be a little bit of those. And that led to about 30 actual interested customers. And we decided to go the safe bet and have just 10 join right off the bat. Any investments we get are gonna go right into our marketing expenses to target bigger Twitch streamers and partner with YouTube channels. Next, please. And now we're going to go on to Garrett for our demonstration.
All right, can all of you see this here?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so this is our home page for Fissure. First, we're going to do a little bit of a run through of our tournament organizer. So we're going to start off by creating a tournament here. I have no idea what just happened. If we go back here, we can create a new tournament, and we can, it's as simple as just entering a tournament name, even if it's misspelled, and setting it to a date that is not in the past, and setting up a time, picking a style, and then clicking create. And from here, we have access to edit all of the tournaments that we've already made, such as the one that I just created. But we've created one ahead of time for the purpose of speeding this up. And we're going to go ahead and go to that one where we already have some users registered, and we're going to start creating some teams. So we've already created 3 teams for our 4-team bracket that we're planning on. So we're going to create one new team. Here are all of our players registered. And if a player is registered for multiple roles, they'll show up multiple times on this list so that you can pick which role you want to put them in. So we're going to start moving players into the roles that we want them to play. And now we have a team ready. And we would save the changes. And now that we have all 4 of our teams, we can go back to edit that and create a bracket. So we would make it a 4-team bracket with team 1, team 2, 3, and 4. And once we have that, we will save and publish. And we will get taken to this screen where we can actually play out the bracket. We can reset it if we need to. And if we wanted to leave it for a future date, we can save the changes so that it can be accessed again. So now we're going to go back and we're going to test out our draft tool. I've already created one for the sake of time, and I'm going to go ahead and join. We should have users already in here. Wait, can one of y'all switch off of top lane so I can take it, please? Thank you. All right, and now that it's ready, we'll go to our admin page and start the draft. First, we have our declaration phase where everybody gets to hover a champion. This allows them to say what champion they're going to play and tell their teammates, but nothing is actually being picked or locked in at this point. No commitments are being made. You can swap around as much as you want. And I don't know if you can hear that. It's a little bit loud right now, but we do have sounds on all of the icons, and whenever it turns to your turn, this is the ban phase where I get to ban a champion. So I'm going to ban this one here. And you can see that it's no longer pickable. You can't click on it, and only the other champions are left. So we're going to go through, and you can see all of my teammates. You can see that they're hovering champions, but you can't see the champions that the enemy team is hovering, so that you can strategize with your team without giving away your plans to the enemy team. So once we've finished all of our bans, we will immediately go into the locking phase, where we actually get to pick our champions one at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and lock and steal the champion from my jungler. And you can see that it disappears off of him. Sorry, Caden. And you can see enemy team is now picking. Now that they've actually locked their champions, it's showing up. And now that they've actually committed, so we can see what they're going to play. And none of these champions are available now that they've been picked by other players. So all of these are taken and no one else can pick them. We're going to cut it short here, but the rest of the draft phase would play out by finishing off the bans. As you can see, he's starting bans back here, and then letting the last 4 players pick their champions. And that is it for our demo. Thank you guys so much. We'll open it up to questions.
So I have a question for the CIS majors. Are there any particular relationships or, oh, excuse me, sorry. Are there any particular relationships that you guys would like to pursue with advertisers or perhaps another company with your game?
There's not really any particular companies or anything we wish to pursue. It's mainly coming down to which Twitch streamers in an optimal universe we'd be able to pursue. Big people like Tyler One or Gosu or some of the professional gamers in the league tournaments. Those would be ideal partnerships that we would be able to actually partner up with to get our name out there.
Thank you.
I have a question. It would be for one of your CS members, though. So if I remember talking to some of you guys in the beginning of the semester, there was a statement about you guys potentially adding player statistic pages and leaderboards. And I saw that you guys did not present that. Is there a reason you guys abandoned that approach?
I can take that. So the problem with the player statistics pages is we would have to be going through the Riot API to get that data. And we have to make very limited use of the Riot API because they have a rate limit on it of only 100 calls per minute. And that seems like a lot, but when you're trying to keep track of 100 million players, it's really not feasible. You could only refresh, I think if my math was correct, it was about 36,000 of them every day. And if we actually were reaching out to the audience we would like to, we're way above our rate limit for calls. The only other way that we can get more calls with that rate limit would be to partner with Riot and get our app approved by them. But if we were to do that, they would not allow us to monetize our app and charge our users for anything. So we were forced to abandon that just because of the business perspective of it.
I had another question for the CS majors. Why did you guys settle on React?
I can take that one. I do want to note that for some reason, half of our CSS and HTML kind of broke halfway through, and it's never happened to before. But to get back to the question, we picked React just because it's kind of the modern kind of JavaScript front-end framework. It's very popular. It has a large community to support it. So if we ran into any issues, there'd be a lot of support and issue and kind of stuff we could find online. The other reason is it just happened to be the area me and Garrett had the most experience in compared to some of the other frameworks out there. And then the third and final one is because of how fast and reactive it is. React is besides Vue, is one of the only frameworks that can manipulate the DOM without refreshing a page. So just a lot of the functionality and use out of it.
I had a question for you, JT. It seemed like in the beginning you had a lot of trouble with like your cloud back, all that stuff, and I was wondering why you used Firebase instead of the other different services that are out there.
I'll actually let Tyler answer this question.
Yeah. When we were originally picking up these, like deciding between AWS and Firebase, we originally were deciding that Firebase would be the more ideal situation for us because it was very lightweight while still offering everything we needed. And we felt that AWS was very above what we needed in terms of what it was bringing to the table. In the end, we actually kind of did need a little bit of extra stuff that Firebase didn't have, but because it was still under the Google umbrella, everything kind of still worked in the long run. So it was a sort of a happy little accident that we went with this, but also we still feel like it was a good choice overall, if that answers your question.
I have a question for CIS. How did y'all land on the $3.50 a month price point?
Like I said before, we had done a Reddit focus group. The 30 participants that actually gave meaningful answers, they all gave a price point they'd be willing to pay per month for it. So we took the 30 answers, added them all up, divided them by 30, and we came out to an average of $3.50 a month. And that's how we landed upon our price point.
I'm curious, what was the highest price point that you saw someone recommend?
The highest price point that they said they'd be willing to go was about $8.50 a month. Meanwhile, the lowest one we got was 50 cents.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, okay. Thank you to the team Fissure. Okay.
I had a quick question for JT. If
Okay.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
What was some like trials and tribulations that, because it seemed like you had trouble with the draft tool in the beginning?
Yeah, so the draft tool was mostly broken due to the backend not being hosted correctly because we originally tried to do it in Cloud Functions, as I discussed in the PowerPoint slides. And realistically, that was just because Firebase doesn't allow the two-way connection that Socket.io was expecting on the client side. So it would send sometimes, but other times it just wouldn't send at all. And so I walked through like multiple different ways of using GitHub Actions to push it to Cloud Functions, and none of those worked. I walked through multiple other ways of being like, how do you use this, and reading all the documentation and spending a bunch of hours on it, and none of those worked. So instead of only using Firebase, I moved to Google Cloud and just using that broader umbrella of Google Cloud offering, and having that like bare metal server that you have the ability to change what you want allowed for much ease of using Socket.io as it's intended.
If y'all don't mind, this is what the site normally looks like when it's not broken. I think I just needed to refresh the page. We were on a slightly older version there. This is what it normally looks like. I swear it doesn't look like that normally. That was just a fluke thing that, of course, happened in the final presentation.
And that should be everything. Thank y'all.